David Cobb, our good friend from CBS Sports, covering college basketball. His new power rankings are out at cbssports.com. He's got Houston leapfrogging UConn and Purdue for number one. So Calvin Sampson and the Cougars, number one after impressive showing. UConn's dropped 2, Purdue 3. David is joining us now. Good morning, David. Thanks for hopping on. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you hopping on because college basketball's heating up. March is around the corner. A lot of us out here, football season's done. The Blazers suck. There's only so many things to pay attention to right now, and college hoops is one of them. I want to start your power ranking. I enjoyed going through this, and I know one team is going to be changing in your next power ranking given what happened last night. But I don't know, how often, David, have we had a team be as dominant or good as Purdue, and nobody in America thinks they have a shot in hell to win the championship?
Well, it's a reputation at this point for Matt Painter and Purdue. Great regular season team, but a team that has gained the reputation for flopping in March. And that predates last year's loss to Fairleigh Dickinson in the NCAA tournament. It's been a long time since Purdue has made an Elite Eight or a Final Four. And that's why there's so much skepticism around the Boilermakers. It's just we got to see it before we believe it. We saw it last year with UConn. They cut down the nets. We've seen it with Houston and Kelvin Sampson reaching a Final Four. So we just got to see it with Purdue, I think, before you can really trust them.
Washington State goes to Tucson last night. Now, Arizona's 4 in your power ranking. Washington State stayed at 19, as you highlight in your power ranking article. Thursday's showdown in Arizona will be a significant test for the Cougs and a chance to elevate their national profile after they beat the Wildcats at home on January 13th. A win would also bring a Pac-12 title into the picture. They won. They came back. They were leading at half. Arizona comes out in the second half, takes a little bit of a lead. It becomes a back and forth. They get a massive and one with a three-pointer, and they get a huge road win. How do you view the Cougars right now, given what you said about them in your power ranking, now that they've beaten Arizona in Tucson?
Well, first off, I'm just annoyed with Arizona that I finally trusted them enough to move them back into the top 5. And then they go out and lose at home last night because, I had been down on Arizona, and I had them a couple weeks ago. I had them out of the power rankings after they lost to Oregon State. And I got a lot of flack for that. And now that they had started to regain my trust, and I elevated them in the power rankings, and then they got swept by Washington State. And all credit goes to Kyle Smith and that Cougars team because everybody, myself included, just thought that Arizona was going to walk away with the Pac-12, win it by multiple games this season because UCLA was down. Oregon can't quite get it together. But Washington State said, no, hold on a second. We got something to say about this. And there was really no reason to think that was going to be the case. Because when you looked at that Washington State roster before the season, there was nothing there that indicated something like this was in store. And so all credit to Kyle Smith for IDing the guys that he needed in the portal and then putting them together in a coherent fashion to where they can go on the road and beat a team that was projected as the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Their remaining schedules, it's manageable. They should be able to win the remaining games. You can never, be completely confident, I think, in college hoops, but their schedule's in their favor. If they finish this thing out and win the regular season Pac-12 title, I know the conference tournament's the biggest one, but if they finish the season number 1, is Kyle Smith your coach of the year?
I think he would have to be. Lamont Paris at South Carolina was sort of the early darling in that conversation. They've begun to fade a little bit at South Carolina. Still probably going to be the SEC coach of the year. But when you start having that national conversation, I think you got to look hard at Kyle Smith, especially if, as you mentioned, they are the Pac-12 champions, which at this moment, they're in the driver's seat to be that. So, yeah, absolutely. I think he's on a list of about 3 to 5 maybe right now. And what he did last night, as I mentioned in those power rankings, it's only going to elevate the national profile. And so I think that really helps Kyle Smith's case.
David Cobb's our guest here, CBS Sports, covering college football and, most importantly right now, men's basketball at cbssports.com. Power rankings article is out at CBS Sports. .com. Find David on Twitter at David W. Cobb. You mentioned Oregon not having not having a great year by their measurement, but they've kind of pieced it together a little bit. They've been very banged up this year. They're 18-8, and they're not even in a lot of bracketology season. They're not even in the first four out. How close is Oregon to being one of those bubble teams, or is that one of those outside of winning the conference tournament, you don't view them at all as a NCAA tournament team?
Well, they've still got a shot. Right now, our bracketologist at CBS, Jerry Palm, he's got them first four out. So they're not far off. But what it comes down to in a league like the Pac-12, which isn't all that strong and is about to dissolve, is the one or two opportunities that you can find to really move the needle. And at this point for Oregon, it's going to be a road game against Arizona here in about a week. And that's pretty much your golden opportunity, your golden ticket to the dance. If you win that one, all of a sudden that is a high magnitude, high caliber quad one win, and that one gets you on the right side of the bubble. But if you lose that one, even if you win the rest of your regular season games, none of the rest of them are really going to move the needle all that much. And then you could end up in a situation where, you probably at least got to make the Pac-12 title game to get some at-large consideration at that point. So, it all comes down to that Arizona game for Oregon, and I got to think Arizona's going to be pretty determined to defend its home court after what happened against Washington State last night.
Gonzaga, David, has had a long time stranglehold kind of on the WCC. St. Mary's has built their program up pretty well, and they're having a great year. Gonzaga a little down from where they normally are. How do you view Gonzaga for the tourney? Is this a sneak up on team this year with Gonzaga, or is this just kind of a meh, you don't see them doing a whole lot of damage if they get to the tournament?
Yeah, I think it's the latter due to the lack of depth. I mean, they had a really rough go of it with injuries before the season, losing a key figure in Steele Venters, who was supposed to be a big-time contributor for them, to injury before the season even started. So they're among the least reliant on their bench in the country. So it's kind of like a 5 or a 6-man show. And I just think it's difficult once you get to single elimination basketball where you're playing every other day or back-to-back days in the WCC tournament. It's hard for a team like that to piece together a run. So I do still believe Gonzaga is going to find their way to the dance. I'm not sold that they'll make a lot of noise once they get there.
Who would you bet on to win the tournament right now?
Yeah, I think there's some intriguing value probably in the 10 to 15 range on the odds sheet. Now, obviously, UConn, Purdue, Houston, those are your favorites to win it all. But there's been enough flaw in those three to maybe look down a little further and look at a team like Alabama or look at a team like Illinois, who from a betting perspective, you could probably get a good value on at this point with 20 to 1 or greater. So, I would look down at teams like that to be a good value. But, when it comes down to who am I going to pick to win the national championship come Selection Sunday, it's going to be difficult for me to pencil somebody in other than UConn, Purdue, or Houston. And of course, that'll change maybe depending on what happens these next couple of weeks. But those three, to me, have pretty clearly established themselves as the favorites.
I'm coaching sixth grade girls, so I'm watching a lot more college basketball this year than I have in the last couple of years, just to see what coaches are doing. You have a degree in sports analytics from Ole Miss. I saw that in your profile, and it kind of struck me as somebody who is very familiar with analytics. How do you feel like college basketball is using and embracing sports analytics for that sport, given how driven we know the NBA is using analytics? Is college basketball still significantly behind the NBA in the way they use analytics? Because there's a lot of games that I watch where I'm like, this feels like it's looked the same for 30 years. How the sport has evolved with having more information.
It's crazy. The coaches in college basketball run the gamut from total denial over analytics to total obsession. Whereas in the NBA, it's pretty much across the board. There's certain concepts and a base level understanding of analytics. Everybody's got at least one or two people in the front office or on the staff who have a deep understanding of that stuff. In college basketball, you could see coaches just totally deny it or totally embrace it. It just depends on the guy. One to look at who just totally embraces it, who could be in the conversation here, over the coming weeks. Alabama. If you go and look at their shot
Nate
chart,
Oates.
yeah, Nate Oates. It's either all at the rim or all behind the arc, and that's how he likes it, and that's what the analytics would suggest is the right approach. So it's fascinating in college basketball. That is one thing that makes college basketball maybe more interesting sometimes than the NBA. I'm not necessarily saying it's a better product, but just the variety of styles and strategies. Because a matchup can go either direction in terms of pace, style, shot selection, all that, and that makes it interesting on a given night. You kind of never know what you're going to get.
Can you give me a name of a coach that's the opposite of Nate Oates? One that you kind of roll your eyes a little bit. You're like, really? You're that against analytics, huh?
Well, Tom Izzo kind of pushes back on some of the Ken Pom stuff, and I think at when you get to his point in his career, where you've made the NCAA tournament consecutively for a quarter century, you have a national title. You can kind of do and say whatever you want and rebuff the accepted norms, right, of the sport, and maybe go unquestioned on it a little bit. But yeah, he's one that kind of comes to mind as getting, he gets annoyed or frustrated with some of that stuff, and whatever. He's Tom Izzo; he can do what he wants. So that's probably one of the more prominent examples of it. But yeah, you see coaches who are resistant to it, and they prefer sort of their own feel. They prefer what they see in practice, and they'll let their guys go out and take mid-range jumpers if they feel that the situation calls for it. And so I like that we have some of that. I like that we have some of the old school mentality still in college basketball.
Get you out of here with this, David, because it's sports radio, so we got to be a little cliche with this stuff. We debated, of course. We embraced the debate. Is John Calipari properly rated, overrated, or underrated? They lose to LSU. Wildcat fans not happy right now. Where do you land on John Calipari?
Well, I just think the sport has passed him by a little bit, because 10, 15 years ago, you could construct a championship caliber team comprised almost exclusively of freshmen. Well, in this day and age, the sport has gotten so much older with all these guys who had the extra year because of the COVID eligibility clause. And then you've also got the unlimited transfers essentially at this point, which allow rosters to get a lot older as well. And meanwhile, he's over here stocking his roster with 6 freshmen as part of the rotation. And so naturally, when you got 18 or 19-year-olds out there against 23 and 24-year-olds, that's going to be a challenge from a maturity standpoint and from a physicality standpoint. And he's not properly embraced, I don't think, that formula that you need, which, you can have a freshman or 2 in the rotation, absolutely. Maybe 3, maybe even 4. But you've got to have a deep well of nucleus, or a deep nucleus of returning talent, and then a couple of transfers in there who have seen a thing or two in their day. And he just that formula for Calipari is still skewed way too young, and he hasn't figured out that it's difficult to win a title in this era with a roster like that.
Great stuff, man. Overrated. That's how I just took what you said, and thank you for doing that. David Cobb, our good friend from CBS Sports, covering college basketball. His new power rankings are out at cbssports.com and on Twitter at David W. Cobb. Give him a follow. David, it's nice to catch up with you. We'll have to do this maybe around tourney time. Thanks for hopping on this morning, and enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Great stuff. David Cobb, CBS Sports, his power ranking article out. You can find, as he mentioned as well at CBS Sports, the Jerry Palm Bracketology